maybe we should make it a little less about the presence, presents, and more about his presence and our presence in people's lives and how we point others to him.
Yeah. Hey everyone, welcome to Faith in the Folds, a podcast for ministry, biblical studies, and Christian living. I'm your host, Kevin Burr. Today I sat down with best-selling author, ghostwriter, and editor Tama Fortner. Tama is an accomplished children's and general audience author with over 40 books on her resume. Recently, Tama published a new book entitled Simply Christmas, A Busy Mom's Guide to Reclaiming the Peace of the Holidays, a devotional. Now, although written with special emphasis for moms, Tama rightly reminds all of us how to slow down and savor the Savior during this Christmas season. We talked about life, work, writing, and why it's so easy to allow the busyness of the season to define us, and how Christmas is really a time to bring peace and goodness to a world that so easily spins itself dizzy sometimes. If you enjoy the kinds of conversations we're having here on the podcast, would you be willing to like and subscribe to us? And maybe share us with someone you think who might benefit from this? And as always, thank you so much for tuning in today. Well, Tama, thank you so much for joining us today on Faith in the Folds. I am excited to dig into your new book that you've written. And it's going to be a very different track from what we have been doing here on the podcast recently. But I think it'll be a neat little discussion for us to have. Welcome to Faith in the Folds.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin.
Yeah. We first met roughly 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
When Mark Adams, who is dead to me now because he's leaving the church I work at.
Yeah. Who is that again? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And now he's just somebody I used to know. No, we first met when back in Old Hickory, when Mark Adams was youth minister there and y'all were there. And I have seen your stuff pop up on my social media feeds here and there. And most recently, you've written this book called Simply Christmas that we'll get to here in just a little bit. But before we do, tell us about yourself. How, where are you these days? What are you up to? How did you get into writing? Give us an introduction to the acclaimed author, Tama Fortner.
Yeah, I don't know about the acclaimed, but So I say to people, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a sometimes author, and always daughter of the King. I've been married to Jeff for 23 years. We have two kiddos who have grown up much too fast. My son, Kaylor, is a sophomore at Harding. Lauren is a senior at Lipscomb. And I just absolutely have loved watching them grow. I am now an empty nester. So this part-time writing gig has turned more full-time these days. Okay. And that's kind of where I am these days.
Yeah. Let me ask, what was one of the, describe for me, this is not scripted. Okay. I didn't intend to ask you this, but I'm just aware because I've got little kids who are about as far apart as your two are. And at some point I'll get, Linnea and I will get to this point. What happened when it first hit you? Oh, it's really quiet in here. Yeah. Can you describe that moment? What made it sit in? It's like, oh, we are empty nesters, more or less.
Oh, it was really in some ways hard because my son, his senior year was in the middle of COVID. And so he was home all the time. And then Harding actually went back to school that fall of 2020. Mm-hmm. And we came home and there was silence. and it was just really loud silence. So it went from having 24/7 kids to 0. So
Yeah,
it was really very difficult there for a few days.
I bet. Yeah. That I don't know what that silence is like
No,
with a
not at that
5-year-old and a
stage.
2-year-old.
No.
Sometimes I experience it during the day on the rare occasion that I happen to be home. But yeah, we still have a dog. So do y'all have any pets to keep you company?
We do. We have 2 dogs, a senior who sleeps all the time, and a relatively young puppy who does not sleep all the time.
Gotcha.
So
I was hoping you were going to say a senior dog and a sophomore dog to kind of
oh
balance
yeah.
out Lauren and Kaylor there. That's great. Well, how did you mentioned kind of part-time writing that has now grown into full-time writing.
Yeah.
How did you get into writing in the first place?
Oh, so I have always loved books from as young as I could remember. So always loved writing. Um, and so naturally, became an English major when I went to college.
Mhm.
I really wanted to get into publishing, and it's a tough field to get into.
Mhm.
But I was able to get a job as a children's book editor
Okay.
right out of college. I worked at a smaller press for a little while, and then eventually moved to Thomas Nelson,
Oh yeah.
um, doing the kids version. Tommy Nelson
Mhm.
was an editor there, and when Jeff and I decided to have children, I wanted to stay home, but I didn't want to completely give up my job. And as a freelance editor, I was blessed to be able to do a little bit of both. I could say no to projects when teething season happened, and yes when things are a little calmer.
What is it about teething season that's especially challenging or time consuming?
Oh, the crying, the sleeplessness.
And that's just from the adults.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Um, and the connections that I had made there allowed me to get into ghostwriting, and that's what I did for a long time.
Oh wow, cool.
And adaptations for other authors.
Mhm.
Writing for kids is very different than writing for adults. And so you have some very successful adult authors who aren't able to transition to that, or don't have the time to transition to that. And
Mhm.
so, and that just kind of led eventually to doing my own projects. And as I had time, when we became empty nesters, it's gotten to be more full-time than part-time. So,
Yeah.
and God has just really poured opportunities into my life at every turn. So I have to give him all the credit.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe sometime later, I would love to pick your brain about writing. The
Yeah,
kind of writing that I have done most recently is a doctoral dissertation,
right.
which is and obviously in some ways very different from the kinds of things that you've done. But I would imagine that in some ways they are very similar, because you do have to sit down and I would at least think maybe see beginning to end and make
Mhm.
sure all your pieces fit together in ways that are obvious. So
Yes.
maybe
And
maybe a writer's workshop or something like that in the future would be great.
absolutely. And you're still doing the research. You're
Mm.
still digging into the facts. It's your presentation that's going to be much different.
Yeah.
I did a master's thesis in college, so I know a little bit of what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So it's
Yeah.
that academic style versus a more conversational style
Mm.
or a children's style. So a lot of the same elements, just more presentation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the presentation is definitely at the forefront. My concern for presentation is definitely at the forefront
Mhm.
when, say, I do something like preaching,
Yeah,
because I feel pretty confident that I'm going to get the content good, but I
right.
want it to have, like you said, a kind of a conversational tone. I'm I'm not presenting I'm not presenting my statements and then, arguing arguing with other potential detractors or current detractors in the footnotes in a sermon, right? You're not going to get the footnotes in a sermon anyway. But there's definitely an issue of performance or presentation awareness in something like a sermon.
Yeah.
So, well, cool. I, hey, I'm inspired. I'm ready to write
Awesome.
something. I'm
All
going to be
right.
I'm going to be preaching in Sundays in January here coming up. when he who shall not be named leaves us. No, Mark Adams, Voldemort. You heard it here. Mark, sorry about that, buddy. We're throwing you under the bus. All right. So you've got into writing by doing some of the editing process. I suspect that maybe helped you get a sense for maybe some of the do's and don'ts of writing. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. You see what works for other people, you see what doesn't work. And I've been in this business for, 20 something years. And so you learn what sells and what doesn't sell. And while sales is, well, I was going to say it's not at the forefront, but it really is one at the forefront, because if your message doesn't get out there, it's lost some of its point. Yeah. But so I learned, what sells and what doesn't sell, as well as some of the do's and don'ts of writing styles and having a voice that comes through your writing.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, having a voice. I can see some similarities with podcasting too. I mean, there's all varieties under the sun, right? Of different podcasts. Mine tends to be very positive, useful. I think the most roasts I've ever given in a podcast was just 2 minutes ago, right when I was burning on Mark.
Mark, Voldemort, same, same
right.
thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I can see that, and there's definitely definitely a voice, or like a persona almost that comes through there. I think it's a pretty good way to segue into your book called Simply Christmas. Give us the what is Simply Christmas all about, besides presumably celebrating the holidays, maybe with some simplicity in mind. Help us walk through this. What is Simply Christmas all about, and what what are you hoping people will get as they read through this?
Yeah, so the subtitle really sums it up. It's and I have to read it because I get my words mixed up sometimes. A busy mom's guide to reclaiming the peace of the holidays. And so obviously the primary target audience is moms, but I think the message carries through for all of us. Our society, we have just gotten so crazy busy, and it's almost like a badge of honor. The busier you are, the tireder you are, the more you must be accomplishing. And so even though the target audience is moms, I think it's for everyone. Is like, what are we really accomplishing with all our busyness? And how can we simplify things? And the Christmas season just seems to intensify that.
Yeah.
With the events, the activities, the obligations that we feel. And the thing is, none of it is really bad. Mm-hmm. It's there's so many good things. I wanted to give moms or people in general the tools to help them figure out the good things that are best for them, and to give them permission to say, I don't have to do that, or I can do this, but I can do it my way. And it's okay. As long as we're, honoring each other, we're honoring our priorities, and we're honoring God, and with kids, as long as there's no bar for blood, we're good. So, we're good.
A bar for blood.
Hey, I had a boy.
Right. So. Yeah. But I think you're absolutely right. That busyness, the constant need to either produce or to be doing something, mm-hmm. is pervasive. Yeah. I've got one of my best friends from my doctoral program is Japanese, and is actually back now in Tokyo, teaching at his denomination's seminary there in Tokyo. And it's amazing. And he knew that he had to finish everything here in the States before he would go back, because he would not at all finish. I was texting him early in the morning here, and it was 10 p.m. in Tokyo. And he was like, hey, I'm glad you're trying to get me for your podcast. I'd love to do it. I just can't. It's 10 p.m. and I'm still working on stuff. And he's It's no exaggeration to say he has 3 full-time jobs, but that's typical for, for guys, especially in his line of work, but also Japanese culture. But I think that is also typical here. May I ask just your opinion? Why do you think that is? What is it about busyness that we feel like we must constantly be doing and producing instead of taking moments to actually enjoy Sabbath?
I think we fall into a comparison trap. I think it happens on so many levels, whether it's comparing our career achievements, comparing what our kids are doing or not doing, or just comparing how our home looks. That was true for me when I was raising my kids when they were little, and I think it's intensified now that social media is out there and we see all this stuff that other people are doing, and we forget that that's a curated vision that we're seeing.
Yeah. I like how you put that, a curated vision. There is, it at a moment's notice, right? If you were to roll up into my house, it probably wouldn't look as good as it does on Facebook or Instagram.
Right.
But it's
Right.
easy in that moment for me to present that as if, hey, here's the static reality. This is sort of what we always look like. I think sometimes that creates barriers for meaningful engagement with people. I know, a typical thing, right? That, for somebody who would want to invite friends over or something like that, what's the very first thing when you think of, oh, okay, company's coming over? What do you have to do? The very first thing.
Oh, you gotta clean the house.
You got to clean the house. Yeah, you got to clean the
Yeah.
house. And what's so funny is that almost everybody would say that.
Yeah.
But I think most everybody would realize too, it's like, well, if they're your good friends,
Yeah.
then you probably don't have to try too hard to impress them. Otherwise, maybe you need some other friends.
Right. Right. I still remember, I think Lauren was maybe 3-ish. I had taken her to the restroom in someone's home, and she needed help washing her hands.
Mhm.
And they had the hand towel on a little metal stand. And so she reached to grab it and dry her hands. And being short, she pulled it over and it made this horrible clatter. Um, and she burst into tears because their house was perfect.
Mhm.
And it intimidated her even at 3. And I just kind of thought to myself right then and there, I mean, I can still picture standing in that bathroom and saying, I don't ever want my house to be so perfect that people are afraid to knock something over,
Yeah.
or afraid to mess something up just in that act of living.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
that image that we present, and I guess it's a fear that we don't want others to think less of us, or I don't have all my dishes washed. There are dishes that's dirty in the sink right now. Don't tell some of my relatives that, but the truth is,
Right.
none of our houses really look perfect all the time, but we try to pretend that they are. I don't know
Yeah.
why.
And that pretending
Yeah.
can get pretty exhausting, can't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Simply Christmas is about reclaiming this peace, kind
Mhm.
of cutting through some of that. What are some ways you recommend in the book? What are some things that you recommend people do, or maybe not do,
Mhm.
in order to kind of reclaim some of this peace and really bring peace to others?
I think one of the biggest things that Jeff and I have learned the last few years is to sit down before the season actually really gets underway. And we've still got a little bit of time before that happens, and do some pondering. There's a verse toward the end of the Christmas story where Mary sits and treasures and ponders all these things in her heart.
Mhm.
And you put that verse in context, and this is right after a road trip to Bethlehem. It's right after giving birth in not her ideal situation, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shepherds barging in.
Uh-huh.
um, but she's treasuring and pondering the things that really mattered. And it's not what kind of donkey they were driving. It's not, uh, how the stable looked or
Yeah.
what gifts the shepherds did or didn't bring. It was the fact that the Savior was there and all those events that pointed her to him. And so as you get this season going, we like to sit down and ponder ourselves. What are the things that make us smile? What are the things that make our loved ones smile? Um, and what are the things that make God smile?
Mhm.
Because when we filter things through that lens, it helps our yeses and nos to be much more easily identifiable. That Christmas play that everybody around here loves and wants to go to, and we just really don't like, we can say no to that. It's okay.
Yeah. 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 Are there some favorite, do you have some favorite little snippets of the book that you'd be willing to share? Maybe
Oh,
maybe two or
sure.
three off the top of your head that as you look through and think, I find this one to be especially meaningful because I struggle with this the most,
Mm.
or this one really, really helped out in a tough time. Um, I know that is, I know that that's incredibly valuable to be able to look back and reflect
Mm.
and see how maybe in that moment God has given us some grace and
Mm.
some wisdom. It's like, hey, you went through this. Okay, now you can learn what I've been wanting you to learn. Are there any moments like that from the book you can share with us?
One of the things I struggled with as a stay-at-home mom and then as a work-at-home mom was feeling like what I did was completely invisible
Mhm.
because it could be undone. Have little ones.
All
Everything
right.
you do can be undone in 30 seconds or less.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that can be really hard. But I say that from a mom's perspective, but I think that can be true from so many other perspectives as well. That some of the things we invest ourselves in the most can be invisible to the world. Um, and so I love this name of God, El Roi. It's one of my absolute favorites. And so I did write a devotion about El Roi. It's from day 8, and it's about he sees. He sees all those invisible things we're doing. He sees all the invisible struggles. He sees all the invisible prayers and praises we offer him. And he's there. And we're not in this thing alone. So that's one of my favorites. I don't know if you want me to read that one or just chat about it or
Well, let's
um,
chat about that. He gets named that from Hagar, right?
of all people. Yeah.
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 And Hagar is, I mean, for those who grew up in church or maybe didn't and need a refresher, uh, Hagar did not have a very very happy end to her story
Mm-mm.
in the Bible. She was essentially used and and then cast out when she was no longer needed.
Mm-hmm.
And to have her be able to call God the God who sees, that's extraordinarily powerful. Yeah, Tama, what was it about Hagar's story that really it despite the short synopsis I just gave, what was it about Hagar's story that really stood out to you? That's like, there's something worth digging into with this.
Yeah, as you say, she was nothing. In that society, if it was possible to be less than nothing, that was who Hagar was. But she was something to God,
Mm.
enough to speak to, enough to send aid to, enough to see. And when sometimes I realize how lacking I am, um, in the eyes of God, my own imperfections, my own stubbornness, my own selfishness and sin, and I feel like nothing, completely unworthy of his love and grace. And yet there's this promise that we are. And it carries through the Bible, into Psalms, where he knit us together. He knew the days of our lives, into the New Testament with counting the hairs on our head and, knowing every sparrow that falls. His awareness of us is ever present, and it inspires me to turn that around and make my awareness of him ever present, which is a struggle, but with his grace, I'm working on that.
Yeah. It's interesting too that looking at Hagar's story, and especially commenting on, or especially in light of this name that she basically nicknames God, tying that into a Christmas devotional book makes a lot of sense when especially you think about how Jesus describes his own arrival into the world, which is the season that we're in, right? Where we're thinking about this kind of thing. Luke chapter 4 is a time where, as Luke is presenting Jesus's story, it begins with Jesus in a synagogue, his kind of inaugurating his public ministry. He begins with Jesus in a synagogue, and then he reads from the prophet Isaiah. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me to bring good news to whom? To the poor, to the people who are, like you said, are nothing in the eyes of the world. He has sent me to proclaim release to whom? The captives. I mean, Hagar was a slave. That by definition, you're a captive. Recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free. Fascinating. I don't know if you make that connection in the book, but to me, yeah, that absolutely makes sense to tie all of these ideas together from that story in Genesis to the prophecy of what the Savior will do in Isaiah, to Jesus saying, right, that's been pointing to me, and I'm ready to do this. I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, and I actually did not tie in Luke chapter 4, but I am totally stealing that and tying it in.
Second edition, right?
Yes.
Yeah, simpler Christmas.
Yes.
Second edition. Yeah. Well, no, that's pretty neat. And yeah, the idea being, right, that we do see, that we do turn our awareness away from the ease of self-centeredness, especially around a time where, yes, I mean, you're wanting to, I don't think there's anything wrong, right, with wanting to get somebody a really good gift.
Right.
I do not make enough money to get people the gifts that I would want to give them, because I would want to give them the good stuff, right?
Right.
But I can't help but also know that some of that is like, I also appreciate the pats on the back. Kevin, this was so meaningful. Kevin, you're so thoughtful. Kevin, wow, you're this, you're that. It's like, then it's about me. And it doesn't need to be about me. It's too easy to make it about me. Yeah.
And that's one of the challenges that I offer moms and people in general is when we set out to find that perfect gift and like you say, get that pat on the back, because I mean, man, when you see their eyes light up, that's just the best ever, right? Or get that giant hug or that handshake or whatever. But my challenge to you and to others would be, what will your kids, what will Linnea, what will anyone remember 10 years from now? Will they really remember that gift, or will they remember your presence in their lives? Because I think we put so much pressure on ourselves. And I mean, you can look at business reports of how much people spend on Christmas and go into debt for Christmas. And maybe we should make it a little less about the presents, presents. Spell that Prese.
We can edit that to where you got it.
Yeah. And more about his presence and our presence in people's lives and how we point others to him.
Yeah. By way of analogy, I can see how it's similar to a wedding versus a marriage. Wedding versus a marriage. I had a friend in grad school who had she went to Lipscomb, and she was, I think her original idea was to do something that would allow her also to do some wedding planning for folks. And she distinctly, I remember seeing a handful of instances where she noticed that either her friends or the people that she was planning on working with spent astronomically more time on their wedding when there were glaring, gaping holes and things that would affect their marriage.
Yeah.
And so Christmas Day, right, can be the wedding, so to speak, right? The big moment where where everything's just perfect and everybody lights up, and the pictures are pretty because everybody's in their matching pajamas and stuff.
Yeah.
Versus, like you said, the presence throughout their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that hits hard for somebody who's got young kids at home. Absolutely.
Yeah, but ask your kids what they love about Christmas. Because we talked about in the book, simplifying some of the traditions. And my kids are, of course, a little bit older. And we asked them, what matters to you about Christmas? What do you love about Christmas? And, they did not say any of the things that I thought they would say.
Really?
They didn't really talk about the presents. They didn't talk about, there were a couple of food items. They talked about particular cakes and pies, but
yeah.
But their two biggest things were going to see the Christmas lights and sitting with all their cousins gathered around their grandparents reading the Christmas story from the Bible. And that's what they talked about. And so I think we get in our minds this image of what we think our kids value, and maybe it's not that at all.
Yeah. I can just imagine, right? Both of your kids are at college and they're sitting there texting you, Mom, send us pictures of what Elf on the Shelf has done this morning. That's not what they're interested in. They're interested in some of these other things. I like this idea of simplifying Christmas traditions. Is that another thing that you go into detail in the book?
It is. And it largely revolves around having conversations. I am a huge believer in families sitting down together and having actual conversations. Your 2-3-year-old is probably a little bit young for this, but your 5-year-old's probably ready to have some input. And it's just about, what is it that makes Christmas for you? And so we have that conversation pretty much every year, and it changes over the years. We don't want to throw out the sparkly oats for Santa's reindeer anymore. But we still really want to go see the Christmas lights.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all about conversations. And I think when we include our kids in those kinds of decisions, it helps them see our reasoning as well and learn to reason on their own about what they want to prioritize in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the sparkly oats. Have there been other things that you've seen them kind of grow and either grow past or maybe kind of lean into some things that you were pleasantly surprised that they really, appreciated this particular aspect of Christmas that somehow indicated their growth or maturity?
That answer about loving hearing their grandparents and cousins read the Christmas story, I would never have expected that. Because they would gather around the grandparents, and it's kind of this, oh, here we go, and I think that was just kind of a face they were trying to put on so they looked cool as they got older, because they really enjoy that time. Neither of them talked about the presents. They enjoy some of the ornaments as we pull them out. That's kind of a time for us to talk about past trips. We're not big souvenir collectors, but when we do vacations and special moments, we get a Christmas ornament.
Yeah.
And so our tree is like this memory tree when you pull it out every year. So they enjoy doing that. We do simple things like pizza and a Christmas movie. We've learned over the years that we're not big, go out and do big loud things. We're kind of quiet people, and that works for us. If you like to go out and do the big and loud things, that's great. And that's kind of what Simply Christmas is about, is just, it's okay to do it your own way.
Yeah. Yeah. I, I like hearing about those different little traditions that you do. We've got some at our house that we've both picked up on from each other's families. One thing that that my wife and I have done in the past is exchange dollar presents. When I was little, on Christmas Eve, we wouldn't get to open up any of the big presents under the tree. We would exchange dollar presents. And that was always kind of a neat thing. And it was a great opportunity to to be kind of creative.
Yeah.
And to find something small that that I know this person will still like. I would say that's definitely harder than just okay, the sky is the limit in terms of budget. Here you go. But dollar presents have been fun in the past. When you mention when you mention just kind of the gathering around at Christmas, this wasn't at Christmas, but a few weeks ago at Thanksgiving, we, because of COVID, that was the one year in my memory that my mom's family, like all of us, like my mom and my dad and my older brothers and their families, so like all of us, did not go over to my aunt's house. My aunt has lived, years ago, she lived there in Donaldson with my folks, just about a mile away. We're going to church there with my folks. Mom and aunt are 2 years apart. And so that was last year was the first year that we didn't get together. And Thanksgiving is usually the only time I get to see that side of the family, just because, we're all spread out doing different things. So this year when we were back, 8:15 rolls around, we're having a great time. We're talking and just catching up and really enjoying each other's company. And there was almost some controversy, because normally on Thanksgivings, what we would do is after we would eat, a bunch of us play musical instruments. So we'd get together and play Christmas songs. My dad and my uncle were both band directors. And so they have, little Christmas songs ready to go. My middle brother is very musically talented. And so he can take a Christmas song that he hears, on the radio, or, one from one of the hymnals, a Christmas hymn, and can like transpose that for the different instruments that we have represented there. And so it's kind of cool. But this year we were all kind of like, we might just want to talk and hang out this year. And that we did end up playing some, but it was a really strong longing and desire to be with each other that we just hadn't felt or hadn't had in a year's time. Yeah. So I'm definitely there with Kayla and Lauren, spending time with family. Absolutely.
COVID robbed us of so many things, and some people, it robbed them of some people. But with everything, there were also some kind of hidden treasures in there. And I think one of those is this renewed priority that we have on family and on the people we love, and treasuring those moments of actually getting together.
Yeah. Yeah. Tim, is there anything else, any really solid nuggets from Simply Christmas that you want to share with us?
I think it's not just a bit of advice or tip that I have for Christmas, but for the whole year through. My goodness, we just need to turn everything back to God. That awareness that He is with us, that we have the opportunity to talk to Him oh my goodness, the creator of the universe wants to hear from us. How amazing is that?
Yeah.
And just the wonder of that, and to communicate that joy and awesomeness to our kids, to our families, to just whoever we might encounter, and to carry that with us through the Christmas season and onward through every day of our lives. That's the main thing I would hope people take away from this book.
Yeah. Don't lose the joy, right? Don't lose the wonder. Christians should have, I'd say they should have the most joy, because we should realize the depth of the gifts that we've been given, I would think.
We should, but sometimes I think the devil likes to give us a little extra dose of attack and try to steal that joy. And so it's just that daily re-seeking of it, and staying in his word and turning to him at every opportunity. That's the real source of the joy, and the sure way to defeat that other guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Last thing I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Anything else we can do to bring maybe peace to ourselves, peace to others around us? You mentioned turning everything over to God. Are there some particular things that you do that you found especially helpful during this time of the year?
It's this time of the year, and really every day. I start the day with God. Some days I'm able to start with a whole chapter or a nice long study. Some days I'm grabbing a verse, but starting my day with God makes all the difference in the world. And I know that especially moms and dads with little ones in those seasons of life, sometimes you're starting the day may come after one or two other things.
Yeah, that's fair.
But including him, that makes all the difference, because sometimes I'll get busy and halfway through my day and I'm like, why is everything going wrong? Oh yeah, you procrastinated on getting that time with God, on getting that word into your heart, and it just really makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I have found to be true, and actually have done kind of a little bit of an experiment this week, is if I get woken up early, before our boys get up, I might grab my phone and I'll scroll through some social media, or I'll try to knock out some emails. And what I find myself is that I'm generally more anxious. And so yesterday and this morning, I intentionally left the phone in the other room. And even though in that moment I wasn't reading scripture, I wasn't this morning I did take some intentional time to pray about some of the transitions that our church is going through, like I mentioned earlier. I intentionally left my phone in the other room, and I was definitely more calm, more peaceful in that time. And in the mornings, which are hectic because got to get the boys up, got to get the oldest one dressed, got to get him to eat on time so we can get to school on time, and all this other stuff. Yeah.
I am one of those people. I said I would never be. I keep my phone by my bed now. But I have two college students.
Right.
And there has been that one 4 a.m. phone call that has cured me. And so now that phone stays there. And it turned out to be fine. Lauren was just a little sick, but I'm learning there are so many Bible apps now. So when I wake up in the morning, I grab the phone, but I've trained myself, to hit that Bible app first. It's such a much more peaceful, calm start to the day.
Yeah, definitely. Last thing I want to ask, help us promote your book. Where can we find it? Tell us where the best place to get it from, online, in person, if you're running any kind of discounts or anything like that.
Yeah, so if you're looking for it in person, I think most Christian bookstores have it. It's in your Target stores. Barnes and Noble carries it. Online, everybody from Amazon to whomever. The easiest place would be to go to my website,
Okay.
tamafortner.com.
All right.
And there are links to all your favorite retailers from christianbook.com to Amazon to Barnes and Noble. But yeah, that would probably be the easiest place is on the website. And there's also a free study guide there right now if you'd
Oh,
like
hey,
to
cool.
download that with it. Mhm.
Yeah, good. Tamafortner.com, right? Okay.
Yes.
I'll be sure to put a link to that in the description below. And that way we can really, kind of encourage folks to get over there and check all that out.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. Tam, I really appreciate your time this afternoon with us. Thanks so much. And I hope everything goes well. Looking forward to Simply Christmas Edition 2
Yes,
next year, where you're able to insert Luke chapter 4 in there.
exactly. Thanks for that idea.
Will do. All right. Tammy, you have a good rest of the afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and Merry Christmas to all of you.
You too.